Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session of our Islam Study Circle. The Quranic verse that we're going to study today is from Surah Nisa. It is the 59th verse of Surah Nisa, and the words are Ya ayyuhal lazina amanu atiyullaha wa atiyur rasula wa ulil amri minkum fa in tanaza'atum fi shay'in farudduhu ila Allahi war rasul in kuntum tu'minuna billahi wal yawmil akhir zalika khayrun wa ahsanu ta'wila. Believers, obey God and obey the Messenger and those of you who are in authority. However, if you disagree among yourselves in any matter, refer it to God and the Messenger if you believe in God and in the last day. This is better and more seemly as regards the consequences. So this Quranic verse, dear viewers, has a very special and a very important message to give us, and that is relating to the rule of law. It tells us that as Muslims, as citizens of a country, we have to obey the rule of law. We must follow the law of the land. We cannot break laws, and in fact, if we follow the law of the land, it is very much like following the Sharia itself. So the words Ulil Amri Minkum actually stand for this, that as citizens of a Muslim state, as citizens of an Islamic state, we are bound to follow what our rulers legislate for us, even if we don't like it, because this is the only way through which we can ensure that there is no anarchy and disorder. A person can differ, but he cannot disobey. So differing with something and disobeying something are two entirely different things. As far as differing from something is concerned, we have been given this democratic right. But as far as disobeying something is concerned, when it relates to the law of the land, then of course this is not something that we are authorized in any way. And remember that laws are of all sorts. We have municipal laws, we have traffic laws, we have tax laws, we have so many laws of a country. And it is befitting that we do not disobey any of these laws. And especially we need to explain this to our younger generation, that obeying the law is like obeying the Sharia itself. Obeying the law is like obeying the God Almighty Himself. And as small things as, for example, texting while you are driving, or talking on the phone when you're driving, which is in most countries an offense. It's a traffic offense. So any offense which is done, it's not merely something which is done as a means of legislation in a country. It has to be understood that the writ of the law and the rule of the law are something which are given respect by religion, and hence it is of paramount importance that whenever we look at these laws, whenever we find these laws facing us, it must be that we have to follow them. We have to understand them, of course, and follow them in letter and spirit. Also, we need to understand that the Sharia in itself and the law of the land, of course, there are things which might clash with the two. But again, if there is a clash, then it has either to be resolved, or if it cannot be resolved, one is not bound to obey the law of the land in that case. But of course, if this is an offense, then he or she will have to face the punishment, lest he or she might or should vacate that place. But we have to understand that especially our younger generation, they need to be told that following the law is following religion itself, and such is the sanctity of the law of the land that our religion has elevated it to following religion itself. And we have to be extremely careful, we have to be extremely on guard that we don't break laws, and we always follow these laws. Next, we go on to the hadith of the day, dear viewers, and this hadith relates to a very important phenomena that all of us come across every now and then, and that is anger. Anger is an emotion, although it is basically a positive emotion, because if one feels anger at some of the injustices that go on in this world, it is perfectly in line. But anger at weak people, anger when we are venting out our wrath on instances in which we are actually not realizing that the other person might have done something out of ignorance, or maybe out of totally inadvertent manner, then these are instances which do not warrant us to show our emotions and vent anger. So the narrative actually has been taken from the Al-Jami al-Sahih of Imam Muslim, and its words are, it's reported from Abu Huraira, عن أبي هريرة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ليس الشديد بالسرعة إنما الشديد الذي يملك نفسه عند الغضب. Abu Huraira reported that God's messenger said, a strong person is not the one who wrestles well, but the one who controls himself in anger. So this is how the Prophet has explained controlling our anger as the fact that if you want to become a person who's strong, then it's merely defeating someone in a fight, merely defeating someone out of your own physical prowess is not something which can really be said that a person is strong. A strong person in reality is a person who is able to control his or her emotions. This is a sign of strength. When we lose our temper, when we vent our anger, this certainly is not a sign of strength. It is a sign of weakness. Controlling anger is a sign of strength. And of course, it is extremely difficult to control anger. But then there are so many instances and there are so many suggestions which we are given in this regard. And the first of them, for example, is that we have to divide our anger management strategy into two broad proportions. So the first of them is that there are short-term measures and there are long-term measures. So as far as short-term measures are concerned, of course, we should, for example, change our posture, change our location, we should leave the place, we should leave the venue, we should draw deep breaths, we should suggest calming down sentences to us, which for example say that I must not lose my temper, I must maintain my calm. These suggestive sentences also are very, at times they do work. So these are short-term measures. And if this is very difficult and one is not able to control in spite of all these measures, then venting out one's anger through a physical release, that's for example picking up a bat and hitting it hard on a sofa or a pillow or something soft, is a cause of physical release. And it also tells us that we have to actually vent our emotions not on people but perhaps on things which can bear our brunt. And we have to realize that venting emotions is just in the short-term measure is basically a measure in which we have to delay our reaction. If we are able to delay our reaction, if we are able to give time to our response, then we will be able to actually find out the fact that we have delayed a response, and hence that immediate rush of adrenaline, that pumping of blood will be stopped, and our response would be much more sane than it is for a person who is actually doing something in a way that is in a state of frenzy. So these are short-term measures. Of course, these are measures in which we have to remain in control as far as we can of our emotions and our sentiments. Now, there are certain long-term measures as well, which are, of course, very essential to adopt. For example, we need to understand that there is a grand scheme of the Almighty. If something is not going according to our own scheme and plan, and we are actually given to frenzy and we get angry because some unexpected thing has happened, we must suggest ourselves that if things are not going the way we expected, the way we would wanted to have them gone, they are going the way that God wants them to happen. And hence, if we believe in the grand scheme of God, things which have happened against our wishes will still be some things which have happened in according with the plan of God. And hence, because of the plan of God is always in favor of our own well-being, so we need to realize this. And then the second thing in this regard is that we must visualize our response for the future. And that is preparing ourselves that whenever anger will overtake us, I will not lose my temper. I will always control my emotions. So this is like suggesting ourselves in advance. So this is preparing ourselves that whenever a situation of anger arises, I will not lose my calm, I will not lose my composure. So, this auto suggestion, this self suggestion is always helpful. One must realize that we, all of us, are people, are individuals who need this psychological boost and help. And there is no better a psychological help than one can give one's own self. And as I said, planning in advance, preparing ourselves in advance has an imperceptible effect. So, whenever that crunch time comes, we are reminded of the commitment that we made with ourselves. And in a flash of the moment, in the flash of time, we are given that urge to control ourselves. And slowly and surely, we are able to do so. It will not happen immediately. It will not happen as soon as we plan it. It will take time. But we have to give this time to our response and pre-imagine it. And then the third long-term measure in this regard is that we should be individuals who should have a relaxed life. Generally, our boiling point is very near the surface, and as soon as something very small happens, we just burst out. So, the third suggestion in this regard is that we should spend relaxed lives as far as possible, and this can only happen if we are able to actually lead a life in which we are able to work out, for example, have a good exercise, have a life in which we think that all the relaxations, in spite of all the tensions, are being planned for. We should plan our own lives such that there is always time every day for some relaxation, especially physical relaxation, because that is what calms down our bodies, and that is what increases our melting point or our boiling point or our point of anger. And it will take more time for us to get angry if we are individuals who lead relaxed lives. And then the fourth suggestion in this regard, or this long-term suggestion, is that we have to understand that we are individuals who are actually not realizing that the person from whom we have gotten angry might be having some positive points. So, whenever we get angry at a person, we must always look at the qualities that he or she has, and always look at the fact that if he or she is causing bother or a problem to us, then look at the fact that how he or she must have helped us in the past. So, imagining and always giving the benefit of the doubt to the other person, and always thinking that the other person has good habits which might which have been of positive impact on us in the past. And then another suggestion in this regard is that as individuals, we have a life pattern. We know ourselves. So it is best to avoid situations that anger us, if possible. Of course, there are at times situations which cannot be avoided, but then there are times in which we do know that if we step into such a situation, and if we have the choice not to, then it is better not to step in such a situation, because it will make our blood boil and it will cause this needless disturbance in ourselves. So, whenever possible, we should avoid situations that make us angry, because it's always wise to abstain. And remember, as this hadith has said, that controlling anger is not a weak thing. In fact, venting anger is a sign of weakness. Controlling anger is a sign of strength, and venting anger is a sign of weakness. And after all these measures, if all these measures fail, we need to realize that we have to apologize to the person with whom we have been angry, with whom we have been rude, with whom our anger has really wreaked havoc. So, whatever happens, we have to apologize if these measures are not able to stop us from venting anger and from actually being rude and very, very vindictive to the other person. Now we go on to the third part of our study section, and this is the Bible verse of the day. It is taken from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter number 22, verses 37 and 38. So the words are, "And he, Jesus, said to them, have love for the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind." This is this grand planet. We need to understand that life is something which is given by the Almighty, and all of us might be having a lot of temporary supports, a lot of temporary help But the only permanent help that we have, the only permanent support that we have is that of the Almighty. It is only He who gives us support that really makes us strong. And hence, this, as we always emphasize, this God connection is the connection in which we need to immerse ourselves in. We have to connect with God. And as the Prophet Jesus said, that this connection has to be of the nature of total immersion with all our mind, with all our heart, with all our soul. The stronger we have this connection, the better individuals we would be. Because the first and the direct impact that this God connection has on us is that we become better individuals. We become individuals who not only think of our own selves, but of other people around us as well. We become more compassionate, we become more considerate, we become more humble to God Himself and humble before our fellow beings. We become people who are down to earth, we become people who are unassuming, we become people who always think of others. And it's like helping others. And just recently I was reading this very famous bestseller by Dr. Frank Stanel, which said that which is titled as Man's Search for Meaning. It's a book which is worth reading. I would recommend all people to read it if they have time. And the climax is the last sentence of this book. And when one of his students, the author's students, asked him that you stress on finding a meaning in life, so what is your meaning in life? And the author answered that my meaning in life is to help others find their meaning in life. So the biggest thing that we can do in helping out others is to make them find their life purpose, to make them find their mission of life, because they are the creatures of God. Remember, when we love God with all our mind and with all our soul, we would love people who are dear to Him also, and all His creatures are dear to Him. So the creatures who have been made by God, whether they are animals, whether they are plants, whether they are human beings, all sorts of living beings exist on this planet. We need to realize that they are creatures of God, and when we love God, we have to also show love and compassion to all that He has created. And this is something, as you can see, the Prophet Jesus has said, this is the first and the greatest commandment. The first and the greatest commandment is to love God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind. To connect with God, of course, we have various tools. Thus, for example, reading His books, not only the Quran, but of the previous scriptures as well, gives us an idea of how we should connect to God, how God relates to us. And then we also need to be more vigilant in our prayer, in being charitable, especially the night prayer, the prayer in which we are able to get up early in the morning before Fajr and plead with Him and discuss with Him and pour our heart out before Him. This is something which we need to regularly do, because this is what gives us strength. And then spending time at places and with people who are righteous, for example, pious people of God, and places such as mosques, where we not only go for prayer, but we can just go there for meditation. We can just land there and sit there after the prayer or before the prayer or any time and feel God around us. We will be drenched with a feeling that there is someone who is holding me, someone who is nourishing me, who is caring for me, who is always there for me. And one of the best places to find God is to sit in a mosque other than the time of the prayer and just let us feel the emotions and the aura which is around us. Now we next move to the final part of our study circle, and this is a discussion topic of the day. The discussion topic that we're going to study today is that what are the positives and negatives of co-education. Now, the world at large, we can see, has experimented a lot in this area, and we have seen people sending their children to schools in which both genders study together, and we have also seen now the stress once again resuming to this notion that in the earlier years and in the growing years, it's much better to have single gender schools in which girls and boys go to separate schools because of a host of reasons. Of course, one of them is the competition which results between the two genders, which is at times unhealthy. And then we have this opposite attraction between the genders, which of course at times leads them far from their own studies because of the fact that friendship with the opposite gender is something very attractive. Many a time it becomes a hurdle in actually pursuing studies in a diligent way. And then, of course, it does show and it does mean that once these children have grown up and they become mature individuals, and maybe in the universities or college, if it is if they are allowed to, for example, study together, then this is something which can be thought of, because this is the time when they have become mature and understood and not as naive as they were before. And of course, this also gives them confidence in facing each other, and also gives them this trust that the Almighty has created people in this world such that they have a vacuum in their personalities. We know that as men and as women, all of us are incomplete unless there is that completion factor in which a man and a woman comes together, in which a boy or a girl in their later ages in life, they are brought together in a permanent union called marriage. So these things do help, but we need to understand that while growing up and at early ages, these are very tender times, these are very sensitive times. And because we would like people to concentrate more on their studies and on the fact that they must become individuals who become high achievers, it's always a big risk when we open schools in which both genders study together, because of this nature of opposite attraction, and because also we have found in many schools that girls outrun the boys, they outdo the boys in their studies, and this also causes a lot of tension and gender hate as well. There are so many studies which show that this has happened. So keeping in consideration all these factors, it is much advisable that we have single gender schools and high schools and colleges, and it should only be in the very higher studies, in the graduate studies maybe, or even later, when if there is a need, and we can make them study together, so that they're also exposed to the opposite gender in a very in a way in which they have to control themselves. They have to be taught that there is a certain distance that they need to maintain, because if this friendship develops or blossoms, then it becomes an addiction at times, and it might be harmful for the marriage as well. But as I said, this is something which we need to be extra careful about, and we also need to understand that at times we are not able to do what the ideal is. In that situation, it is always best to stick to what best we can do, and try as far as we can as parents to guide them and to be friends with them and make them understand how life and one's own undertakings and one's own attitudes and commitments have a very deep impact on our life goals and objectives. So with these words, I come to the end of this study circle session. If you have any questions, kindly please go ahead. I can unmute your mic, and you can ask questions. So it seems that there are no questions, so we shall end this study circle at this time, inshallah, and we will reconnect on next Saturday at the same time. And until then, it is Khuda Hafiz. Please take care of yourselves.